Hi, today I'm going to show you how to make your accordions work in Wized. More than likely, you're right now facing the issue that you have the code to reinitialize the Webflow animations on your site, but it is still somehow messing up the other animations on your site. If this is happening to you, here's what you want to do. So you probably have this working, but more than likely some other animation isn't working. In this case, we have two animations going on. We have the animation to expand the accordion and to change the colors, and we have the animation to load the content to have it fade in. Now the issue is if you were to use a on-page load animation in Webflow interactions or Webflow animations, and you actually reinitialize this forcefully using the code while the page load animation is in the midst of processing, you hijack everything and break it, destroy it. It's literally called destroy that command. So you destroy everything. So you'll have this glitchiness coming, like animation will look like this. And if you have any idea what I'm trying to say here, you have that issue. And here's how you're going to fix this. It just takes a few minutes. So basically, you don't want to have any page animations tied to your Webflow project. So even if we reload the page and you see, oh, there seems to be a page load animation, this is actually not a page load animation at all. What this is we have this trigger, right? And when we click this trigger, it is starting the page load animation, but it is not starting the page load animation based on page load from Webflow. It is starting Webflow itself. The HTML structure is starting the animation when this button is being clicked, or this trigger custom element. This is super important to look out for, because when we do the code, on page load will not work, because when we have the animation, it will be stopped, right? When we have the reinitialization code. So what we're going to do is we tie the page load animation that you have to this custom component. And as you can see, we have this tied to it on click. So we have our animation in here. And when I click this component, it will play this on page load animation. And as you can see, I can preview it. It will play this animation, right? This is tied to this button when I click on it. So there's nothing happening when the page loads, but when I click on this button, the load animation is starting. And actually on this button or trigger, we have the Wized attribute of Wized page load animation trigger. So let's save this and let's go to Wized real quick. So now in Wized, you can see the moment the page loads, we're getting a page load animation. But that's not really true. The moment the API request finishes, that's when we're getting the page load animation. We're not getting the page load animation when the page starts loading, because since we are reinitializing the fields to make the Webflow animations in this accordion work, we cannot reinitialize, do any reinitialization or apply any interaction or animation before the API request that is dependent to the animation field, to the animation item where the list is being rendered in, is completed. So and this is a rendered list, if this rendered list is tied to the market events, I cannot reinitialize the animation before this request is processed, because we are rendering a list. Right now, this list only has one item. But we need to wait until the list is propagated with all the multiple items, and then we can do the reinitialization via code. What now happens as well is, if you don't have any other animations, you can just work with the code snippet I already made a video about. But if you have any other animations, this whole code will mess up all your other animations on the whole page. And here's how we're going to do that. So we have this button and we're going to click this now programmatically. So we have this interaction action in here, trigger Webflow animations page load animation. So when the request of market events, the one that we are working with in here, this one, finishes, we're going to click the trigger element, and let's not just look into here first, let's first look into this part here. So what we're going to do is we're going to programmatically click this trigger button. I already made a whole video on how you can do that, so I would highly recommend check that out as well. I will put it right in the video description. But this is how we're going to solve this. We have this trigger, we have the attribute applied to it, and we're now going to click this programmatically. So we're going to click this, and as you can see, the animation is going. But before we click this button, we need to reinitialize all the Webflow animations. So before we start this animation in here, and before this moves into viewpoint, right? Or whatever we're doing in the animation, we need to reinitialize everything. Because if I would not reinitialize this, and let's just cut this out, for example, like this, I would just process this accordion will not work. I can click as much as I want on here, it will simply not work, right? So we need to reinitialize the Webflow animations first, and then do this on-page animation. That is not an on-page animation. It will just be clicked when the API request finishes. And the API request of market events will start on page load. So here's the chain that's going on. Instead of loading the animation in Webflow on page load, which is too early, on page load, we're going to do the API request. And then when the API request finishes, we're going to run the function to first reinitialize the Webflow animations and then click the trigger to, via click, manually trigger the Webflow animation like this using an on-click action in Webflow that will then look like a page load action. Because the page load action, and let's actually do an experiment here. Let's add a page trigger on page load and start the page load animation on page load. In Webflow, so far so good, right? Looks wonderful. But now this is where all our issues occur in Wized, actually. If I were now to reload this page, we will not have the Webflow animations working. Because the first animation, even though we reinitialize it using this code, the first animation, I can click as much as I want on here. It will not work. Because we started the initial Webflow animation that moved the components before we could do any reinitialization. And even though we did any reinitialization after that, it will still not work. So we cannot run any animation before we got the data, and then after we got the data, cleared the canvas and reinitialized all Webflow animation in this project. And it would work if I were to click this again. Actually, would it? Yeah, let's click this. It would work now, right? I just didn't click it. Now it would work. But the issue, as you can see, is if I were to remove this part here and I were to load that after that, and like this, it would work, right? But if I were to open this in my tab, right here, you see sometimes it reloads. It double reloads. Let's do this again. You see we have this, yeah, it stops because what the script is doing, there is an active animation going on page load, like this, and it's killing it in the midst of doing it, and then restarting it again so that it can apply the new animations to the dynamically rendered items. So the way we avoid this cosmetical issue of having this content flashing is actually, by, as I showed you before, not having an on-page load animation, but instead tying the on-page load animation not to the page load configured or recognized in Webflow, but triggering this to the page load in Wized, then triggering the API call on page load. And when the API call completes and we got the data, then running this function to first reinitialize everything. And after everything is reinitialized and we don't see it yet in viewpoint, but since it is reinitialized already, working, and then after the accordion is now working, we click this button in Webflow to have it fade into viewpoint with our page load animation, and then we have such a wonderful, smooth experience. It loads into view, and I can expand my accordion. Wonderful. Just like this. Isn't that amazing? And this is how you're going to make your accordion and your Webflow animations work in Wized without any content flashing, without any performance issues, to have it working across all devices and to provide a wonderful and smooth user experience. Because a lot of developers, I think, are afraid of touching Webflow animations in Wized because it is a bit of a workaround, right? But actually, it is super simple. You just need to know what you're doing. And this is why you're watching this video, because now you know what to do. So I really hope that this helped you. I'm excited to see all the amazing animations that you're going to build with it. And feel free to share them in the comments. I can't wait to see what you're building with it. And really, thank you so much for all your support, for watching this video. Thank you so much for being ready to learn new things and to become the developer you never thought you would ever become, you would ever be. And I really appreciate your support. And thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for your time, and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.